I guess the cracks started to show about a year ago, but I was too busy or too blind to notice. Emily and I had been married for 7 years, and life was comfortable. Predictable, even. We had our routines: coffee together every morning, dinner every night, weekend hikes when the weather allowed. I loved our little rituals. They made the chaos of work and bills and everything else feel manageable. We met in college, me with my head buried in accounting textbooks and her with yoga mats and green smoothies. I loved that she was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, carefree, so full of life that it seemed to spill over into everything she touched. I thought we balanced each other perfectly. Looking back, maybe that was the problem. It was Emily's idea to join the new yoga studio that opened a few blocks from our house. She was so excited, her eyes bright and hands fluttering as she explained how much I'd love it. I didn't. The one time she dragged me along, I spent the entire class trembling in poses that looked easy when everyone else did them and praying no one would notice the sweat pouring down my back. But I was happy that Emily was happy. At first, it was 1 class a week, then 2, then 3. Soon, she was going every evening after work, coming home flushed and relaxed, her hair smelling of lavender and eucalyptus. "You're glowing," I'd tease, wrapping my arms around her as she slid past me to the shower. She'd laugh and kiss me on the cheek, murmuring something about the magic of yoga and how I should really give it another try. She started talking about him about 2 months in, Ethan, the instructor. Apparently, he had studied in India, spoke 4 languages, and had some kind of mystical insight into the human soul. "You should hear the way he talks about energy," she'd sigh, eyes distant, fingers toying absently with the hem of her sleeve. It was silly, really, the way his name started to make my jaw tighten. I told myself it was nothing. Everyone has their crushes, right? Harmless admiration. And anyway, I was swamped with work, barely keeping up with the end-of-year accounts. The last thing I needed was to start acting like a jealous fool. But then there were the little things. The way her phone was always face down on the counter. How she started rushing through dinner to get to her evening classes. The way she'd leave the room to answer certain texts, coming back a little too bright, a little too breathless. One Saturday, I picked her up from the studio, hoping to surprise her. The windows were steamed up, glowing golden in the setting sun. I was just about to get out of the car when I saw them, Emily and Ethan, standing by the entrance. She was laughing, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He leaned in, said something that made her blush, her teeth sinking into her lower lip the way they used to when I'd flirt with her back in college. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, stomach twisting with something dark and unfamiliar. I went home instead of waiting, shame burning in my cheeks. I didn't say anything when she came through the door an hour later, cheeks still pink, hair damp from the shower at the studio. I didn't ask why she was late. That night, I lay awake long after she'd fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling, listening to her even breaths and the soft rustling of sheets every time she moved. My chest felt tight, a dull ache spreading through my ribs. I told myself it was nothing. Just my imagination. But that didn't stop me from checking her phone the next morning while she was in the shower. Her passcode hadn't changed. 100 little details had, but not that. There were no messages from Ethan. No saved numbers or recent calls. Just a bunch of texts from her coworkers and our group chat about a friend's wedding next month. I put the phone down, hating the rush of relief, hating that I'd looked at all. I scrubbed a hand over my face, trying to shake the guilt. She came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, hair damp and smelling like vanilla. "Morning," she said, smiling that soft, sleepy smile that used to make my heart flutter. "Morning," I mumbled, pressing a quick kiss to her temple. It was fine. Everything was fine. I almost believed it. But then, the following week, I found the receipt in the laundry, crumpled in the pocket of her favorite leggings. Dinner for 2 at some overpriced bistro downtown. Thursday night. The same night she texted me that class had run late and she was grabbing a smoothie with some of the girls. I stared at the receipt, the neat printed numbers blurring until they didn't make sense anymore. The smoothie place was cash only. She knew I knew that. We went there almost every weekend. The room seemed to tilt, the walls pressing in, too close and too warm. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the receipt clutched between my fingers, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at nothing, the edges of my vision dark and blurry. But when I heard her keys in the lock, I shoved the receipt into my pocket, throat tight with panic. She came in humming softly, a bouquet of sunflowers in one arm and a soft, sheepish smile. "I saw these at the market and thought of you," she said, pressing them into my hands, cheeks flushed pink. Sunflowers. My favorites. The ones she used to surprise me with back when we first started dating. Before yoga classes and crumpled receipts and 1,000 tiny secrets that made my head ache and my chest feel hollow. "Thanks," I managed, voice rough. I leaned in to kiss her, eyes closed, fingers curling a little too tightly in the soft fabric of her sweater. Her lips were warm and familiar, but for the first time, they felt like someone else's. The first time I called her out on a lie, it was almost an accident. I don't even know what came over me, maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the sleepless nights piling up, or the memory of that crumpled receipt still burning a hole in the back of my mind. It was a Friday night, and Emily was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with a small smile. She'd already kicked off her shoes, her legs curled under her, hair spilling loose around her shoulders. The sight was so familiar and yet so distant, like looking at an old photo and realizing the colors had faded. She hadn't touched her glass of Chardonnay. I was halfway through my second. "You said you had dinner with the girls last Thursday," I said, keeping my voice casual, eyes fixed on the deep red stain of marinara sauce on my plate. "How was it?" She glanced up, blinking. "Oh, it was fine. Nothing special. Just some salads and gossip." Her fingers tapped absently against her phone case, a faint rhythm that made my jaw tighten. "We went to that little place by the park, you know the one." She was lying. I knew it before she even finished the sentence. The receipt had been for Maison Blanche, a place I'd taken her for our 3rd anniversary. An upscale bistro with tiny portions and prices high enough to make me wince even now. I should have let it go. Should have smiled and nodded and moved on. But the words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Maison Blanche?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Thought you hated that place." Her fingers stilled, eyes flickering to mine. "What? No, I never said that." Her laugh was soft, almost believable. "You must be thinking of somewhere else." My heart pounded against my ribcage, too loud and too fast. "Maybe," I said slowly, swirling the wine in my glass. "Just thought I remembered you saying it was too pretentious." She shrugged, her smile tightening. "I mean, it kind of is. But the girls wanted to try it, so I just went along." The wine turned bitter on my tongue. "Right," I said. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But all I could see was Ethan's face in my mind, a vague image pieced together from her descriptions and my own worst fears. Tall, dark, charming. Everything I wasn't. That night, when Emily was in the shower, I found myself back at her phone again, hands trembling and shame burning my cheeks. It was disgusting, the way my fingers moved without permission, swiping and scrolling through her texts, her emails, her photos. Looking for anything, any tiny slip or damning detail. But there was nothing. Just the same group chats, the same pictures of sunsets and smoothie bowls and her and the girls grinning in yoga pants and tank tops. I breathed out, slow and unsteady, scrubbing a hand over my face. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the receipt was just. My thumb slipped, swiping left on her recent calls. Ethan's name glowed at the top of the list, timestamped for earlier that day. Every muscle in my body went rigid. My mouth went dry. There it was, raw and undeniable, the truth staring up from a cracked phone screen. The water shut off, the pipes groaning faintly through the walls. Panic surged hot and wild through my veins, my hands fumbling to lock the screen and set it back on the nightstand, heart hammering so loud I was sure she'd hear it. I managed to crawl into bed just as she came out, a towel wrapped loosely around her and steam curling through the open door. She smiled, eyes soft, and slid in beside me, her legs cool against mine. Her fingers traced absent patterns on my chest, her cheek resting against my shoulder. I lay stiff and silent, eyes fixed on the ceiling, breath shallow. You're so tense, she murmured, voice drowsy, lips brushing my neck. Long day? You could say that, I managed, each word tasting like salt and copper. She hummed, her fingers slipping lower, slow and careful. I swallowed hard, muscles clenching as her lips moved to my collarbone, soft and warm and familiar. But all I could think about was Ethan's name glowing on her screen, his hands on her waist, his mouth on hers, her breathy laugh and the way her eyes probably fluttered closed. I pulled back, forcing a weak smile. Just tired, I muttered, rolling onto my side. Sorry. She hesitated, her hand lingering on my hip. Then she sighed, drawing back with a soft murmur of okay that made my chest ache. I squeezed my eyes shut, fists clenched in the sheets, breath shaky and uneven. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I woke to sunlight and the dull ache of a headache. Emily was already gone, her side of the bed cold. I lay there for a while, the silence pressing in, waiting for the ache in my skull to dull and for my hands to stop trembling. The apartment felt empty without her. I moved through the motions, shower, coffee, toast gone cold on the counter, all with a kind of numb detachment, the hours slipping by slow and heavy. Her yoga bag was gone from its usual hook by the door. Saturday morning class. The one she always said was life-changing. I imagined them there, alone in the studio, her eyes wide and bright and fixed on him, his voice low and soothing, his hands brushing hers. The thought made bile rise in my throat. I didn't mean to follow her. Didn't plan it. 1 minute I was pacing the apartment, the next I was behind the wheel, tires hissing on wet pavement, fingers white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The studio was a few blocks away, tucked between a bakery and a florist, windows fogged with condensation. I parked across the street, feeling sick and ridiculous and half-crazed. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. A little after 11, the door swung open. People started to trickle out, women in leggings and messy buns, laughing and chattering, yoga mats slung over their shoulders. Then Emily, cheeks flushed, hair pulled into a low ponytail, a smile playing at the edges of her mouth. And him. Ethan. Tall and tan, dark hair pulled back, a faint smirk curving his lips as he said something that made Emily laugh, her head tilting back, eyes bright and happy. Happier than I'd seen her in months. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. I watched, breath shallow, as he reached out, fingertips brushing her arm, a touch that lingered too long to be innocent. As her eyes dipped to the ground, her teeth sinking into her bottom lip. As she leaned in, just slightly, shoulders curling in, their heads close, too close. My vision blurred, chest tight and raw and hollow. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my forehead to the cool leather of the steering wheel, breath shaking. They didn't kiss. Not there. Not where anyone could see. But they didn't have to. I could read it in the angle of their bodies, the familiarity in the way they moved, a language I'd never learned to speak. There was no more pretending. No more hoping. I waited until they were gone before I started the car. The radio crackled to life, some soft ballad I couldn't place, a woman singing about broken promises in empty spaces. I punched it off, the silence deafening, eyes fixed on the road, hands steady and numb. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove, hands white-knuckled, breath slow and even, eyes fixed on the road stretching out in front of me, endless and gray. By Sunday morning, I had convinced myself that I was wrong. Maybe I'd seen it all through a filter of paranoia and too many sleepless nights. Maybe Ethan really was just a friend. Maybe all the whispers in my head were nothing more than the byproduct of working too many late nights and too many half-empty bottles of wine. But then I heard her on the phone. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I was folding laundry in the bedroom, the door half open, when her voice drifted up the hallway, soft and breathy. I know, she was saying, her tone light and teasing, a warm, honeyed affection that I hadn't heard in months. I miss you too. You know I do. My hands stilled, a pair of socks clenched between them, fingers trembling. I edged closer to the door, every nerve in my body screaming to stop, to turn away, to forget I'd heard anything at all. But my feet moved on their own, soft across the carpet, breath shallow and tight in my chest. Her laugh was a soft, breathless thing, a sound I used to think belonged to me. Stop, she murmured, half-choked with giggles. You're terrible. I clenched the doorframe, knuckles white, the world tilting beneath me. I know, she said, sighing. I wish I could see you tonight too, but no, he's not working late. Maybe tomorrow? After class? A pause. A rustling sound, the creak of the couch cushions. MHM. I can't wait either. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, each step light and careful. I moved on autopilot, grabbing my keys from the kitchen counter, shoving my feet into sneakers. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone twice before I managed to slide it into my pocket. I didn't even hear her come up behind me until her hand was on my shoulder, gentle and warm and so damn familiar. Hey, she said, her smile bright and easy, eyes wide with that practiced innocence that made me want to scream. Where are you off to? Just the store, I mumbled, forcing a smile that I knew didn't reach my eyes. Out of milk. She arched a brow, tilting her head with a soft laugh. I picked some up yesterday, remember? My mouth went dry. Right. Sorry, just habit, I guess. I forced out a laugh that scraped my throat raw, ducking past her with a tight smile. I'll just grab some air, then. Be back soon. Her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second too fast for me to be sure it even happened, before her smile returned, soft and understanding. Okay. Drive safe. I barely made it to the car before my breath shuddered loose, sharp and ragged and tinged with panic. My hands fumbled for the keys, heart hammering so loud it was all I could hear, drowning out the low hum of traffic and the wind rattling the branches overhead. I drove without thinking, streets blurring into one another until I was parked outside a strip mall on the edge of town, the sky a dull, indifferent gray. I stared at the windshield, breath slow and uneven, chest hollow and aching, fingers clenched so tight around the steering wheel that my knuckles went numb. I didn't know how long I sat there, just breathing, fighting the urge to scream or punch something or just drive until there was nothing but empty road and sky. Eventually, I pulled out my phone, hands still shaking, and dialed the only number I could think of. You okay, man? Brian answered on the third ring, his voice groggy and thick with sleep. I need a drink, I managed, the words rough and raw. Are you home? Yeah, of course. Everything, he hesitated. You sound like you're about to pass out. Where are you? Near that bar by 5th. Mind if I swing by? Of course not. I'll put on coffee. Drive safe. The line went dead, leaving only the low crackle of silence. I exhaled, scrubbing a hand over my face, and pulled back onto the road. Brian didn't ask questions. Not at first. He just opened the door with a mug of coffee in one hand and a look of quiet concern, ushering me inside with a firm hand on my shoulder. It wasn't until I drained half the cup, the warmth settling my frayed nerves, that he cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair with a frown. All right, he said slowly. Want to tell me what's going on? I stared down at the dark swirl of coffee, the bitter scent making my stomach turn. I could still hear her voice, soft and sweet and full of laughter, promising someone else the kind of affection she hadn't given me in months. It's Emily, I said, the words sticking in my throat. I think she's seeing someone else. Brian's frown deepened, fingers drumming absently against the table. You sure? I heard her, I whispered, voice cracking. She was on the phone with him. And there's this guy at her yoga studio, the instructor. Ethan. I spat the name like a curse, fingers tightening around the mug until the ceramic bit into my palms. They've been close. For a while now. Brian swore under his breath, dragging a hand through his hair. Have you talked to her? And say what? I scoffed, bitterness burning my throat. Hey, by the way, I've been listening to your phone calls and following you around like some deranged stalker. Care to explain why you've been lying to me for months? He sighed, scrubbing a hand over his face. Okay, fair point. But, man, you can't keep bottling this up. If you don't say anything, it's just gonna. I know, I muttered, the words tight and clipped. I know. I need proof. Something real. Something I can't just explain away. He hesitated, eyes dark and searching, fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the tabletop. "You want help?" he asked finally, voice low and careful. "Finding proof, I mean." I didn't want to say yes. Didn't want to admit how desperately I needed someone else to see it too, to confirm that I wasn't crazy or paranoid or imagining things. But the words slipped out anyway, raw and fractured and shameful. "Please." Brian nodded, his jaw tight. "Okay," he said softly. "Whatever you need, man." I exhaled, slumping back in my chair, hands shaking and chest aching and vision blurred with exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, the tightness in my lungs eased, just a fraction. But the relief was bitter and fleeting, gone almost before I could taste it. Because proof meant admitting that it was real, that the life I'd spent years building was crumbling beneath me, brick by brick, lie by lie. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. By the following week, I was living off cold coffee and half-eaten sandwiches, my nerves frayed and eyes sunken from too many nights lying awake, replaying every detail, every hesitation in Emily's voice, every late night and crumpled receipt. I felt like I was being ripped in half, one part of me desperate to confront her, the other terrified of what I'd see in her eyes if I did. Brian texted me Thursday morning. "Got something. Meet at my place after work." I stared at the message, the words blurring and sharpening, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might split my ribs. My hands shook the entire drive, fingers clenched around the wheel, breaths shallow and unsteady. I parked crookedly outside Brian's apartment, barely remembering to lock the car before I stumbled up the stairs, palms clammy, pulse thrumming with panic. Brian answered the door with a grim expression, stepping aside silently. There was no coffee this time, no easy smiles or casual quips. Just the strained lines around his eyes and a laptop open on the kitchen table. "Got this from a buddy," he said, voice low and even. "Runs security at that yoga studio Emily likes. He pulled the footage for me." My stomach lurched. "Brian," I rasped, throat tight. "Tell me this is just." He shook his head, mouth set in a hard line. "I'm sorry, man," he muttered. "You need to see this." The video was grainy, the timestamp from 2 weeks ago. The yoga studio's back entrance, framed by dim lighting and wilting ferns. I recognized Emily instantly, hair pulled back in a loose bun, her favorite purple leggings, that blue hoodie I bought her last Christmas. She glanced around once, shoulders tense, before pushing the door open. And then Ethan followed. My vision narrowed, white-hot rage and nausea surging in tandem. I gripped the edge of the table, breaths coming shallow and ragged, nails digging into the wood. Ethan's hand settled on Emily's waist, fingers pressing into the fabric, and she leaned in, just slightly, shoulders curling under his touch. She said something I couldn't hear, lips brushing his jaw, and he laughed, tilting her chin up. They kissed. Slow and soft at first, then deeper, her hands fisting in his shirt, his fingers sliding up under her hoodie. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. I just stared, numb and hollow, the image searing into my brain with a vicious clarity. Brian paused the video, the screen freezing on Ethan's hand cupping Emily's cheek, her eyes half closed, lips parted. "I didn't want to show you," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "But you needed to know." I swallowed, throat raw and aching. My hands were shaking, fingertips tingling with pins and needles, while burning in the back of my throat. "How long?" I managed, voice cracking. Brian hesitated, eyes flicking to mine, pity softening the edges of his frown. "At least a month, from what my buddy could tell," he admitted. "Probably longer." "A month. Or longer." Every breath scraped my throat raw, my lungs tight and useless. I stumbled back, chair legs scraping against the tiles, hands clenched so tight I could feel my pulse throbbing in my fingertips. "Hey, whoa, easy," Brian said, catching my shoulder, voice low and careful. "Breathe, okay? I know it's. I twisted away, shoving blindly for the door, vision swimming. The hallway blurred, lights too bright, walls too close. I barely made it outside before my knees gave out, slumping against the hood of my car, dragging and gasping, shallow breaths. The image wouldn't leave Ethan's hands on her waist, her eyes fluttering shut, the soft curve of her smile pressed against his mouth. My chest ached, raw and hollow, each breath like shards of glass in my lungs. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember unlocking the door or dropping my keys or stumbling to the bathroom, retching until my stomach was empty and my throat burned. I barely registered the sound of the door opening, Emily's voice, soft and cheerful. "Hey! I got those pastries you like," she called, keys jangling as she nudged the door shut. "They had that almond croissant you owe." Her footsteps paused, then drew closer, slow and cautious. "You okay, babe?" I looked up from the bathroom sink, hands braced on the porcelain, eyes bloodshot and rimmed red. My reflection was a stranger pale and gaunt, eyes too wide, lips bloodless. Emily's face shifted, smile faltering. "Hey," she said softly, concern creasing her brow. She reached out, palm warm against my arm. "What's wrong?" I jerked back, heart lurching. "Don't," I snapped, the word raw and vicious. "Don't touch me." She flinched, hand dropping to her side, eyes wide and startled. What's going on?" she stammered, voice wavering. "Did something happen?" I laughed, bitter and sharp, the sound splintering in my throat. "Yeah," I bit out. "You tell me, Emily. Something you want to share?" Her eyes flickered, barely a hesitation, a breath, a heartbeat. But I saw it. I saw the flash of guilt, the way her mouth tightened, how her fingers curled into her sleeves. I barked a laugh, swiping a hand over my mouth. "God," I rasped, voice cracking. "I should have seen it. All those late classes, all those text messages, you and him, right? Ethan?" Her face went white, lips parting soundlessly, eyes glassy and wide. "I know, it's not." "Don't," I growled, the word low and fractured. "Don't lie. Not now." She inhaled sharply, shoulders trembling, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't." "You didn't mean for me to find out?" I snapped, fists trembling. "Or you didn't mean to cheat on me with that," the word choked off, too raw to say. Emily's lip trembled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Please," she pleaded, voice small and desperate. Can we talk about this?" I laughed again, sharp and hollow, scrubbing a hand through my hair. "Talk about what, Emily?" I spat. "About how you've been sneaking around with him for months? About how I'm supposed to just, what? Forgive you?" "It wasn't," she stammered, voice splintering. "I never wanted to hurt you, I swear." "Well, congratulations," I snarled, chest heaving. "Because you did." Her face crumpled, hands rising to cover her mouth, shoulders shaking with quiet, gasping sobs. I watched her, heart splintering, rage curdling to raw, aching grief. I'd never seen her cry like that, so broken, so small. But I couldn't reach out. Couldn't touch her. Couldn't look at her without seeing Ethan's hands on her, her lips on his. So I turned, heart pounding, throat tight with unshed screams, and left her sobbing on the bathroom floor. It's been 3 weeks since that day, but it feels like years. Maybe longer. The apartment is quiet now, so quiet that I can hear every tick of the kitchen clock, every groan of the pipes when the heat kicks in, every muffled sound from the neighbors upstairs. I sit in the dark most nights, staring at the blank TV screen, phone dark and silent beside me. Emily's gone. I don't even know where she's staying. Her mom's, maybe, or one of her friends from yoga. She packed a bag that night, eyes rimmed red and hands trembling, words spilling out between gasping, breathless sobs. "I'm sorry. I love you. I didn't mean for it to happen. Please, can we talk about this?" I didn't answer. I just watched her, hollow and numb, every word sliding off me like oil on water. Her voice was just noise. Her face was just a mask. I kept waiting to wake up, to open my eyes in our bed and find her next to me, hair tangled on the pillow, lashes fluttering as she mumbled something soft and warm. But I didn't wake up. The nightmare just stretched on, day after day, with no end in sight. The apartment still smells like her. Lavender and eucalyptus, that vanilla lotion she loved, the faintest hint of coffee and mint from her shampoo. Her books are still stacked on the shelves, the throw blankets she picked out still draped over the back of the couch. I can't bring myself to move anything, can't even look at the photos lining the hallway, our wedding day, that weekend at the lake, her grinning with her nose crinkled and her eyes bright. I haven't touched my wedding ring. It sits heavy and cold on my finger, the edges digging in when I clench my fists too tight, the band dull and scuffed. I twist it absently, staring at the wall, at the table, at the dark spots on the ceiling where the paint's peeling. I can't take it off. I don't know why. Brian checks in every couple of days, voice soft and careful. He brought over takeout last Friday, Chinese from that place down the street that Emily loved. I managed 2 bites before I had to excuse myself, throat tight and eyes burning. The smell of sesame oil still lingers in the kitchen, greasy and cloying. I haven't gone back in since. The only time I leave the apartment is to go to work. Even that feels mechanical now, shower, tie, suit jacket that smells faintly of mothballs, the same route every day. My coworkers don't ask questions, though a few of them glance at the dark circles under my eyes, the way my hands shake when I pick up my coffee. I catch my reflection in the glass, sometimes pale, gaunt, a stranger in my clothes. I look away quickly, fingers clenching on the steering wheel, pulse fluttering weakly in my wrists. It's a Wednesday afternoon when the letter arrives. Plain white envelope, my name scrawled across the front in her looping handwriting. I stare at it for a long time, fingers numb and trembling, vision blurring at the edges. I think about throwing it away, leaving it sealed and forgotten at the bottom of a drawer. But my hands move on their own, tearing the flap, unfolding the pages, eyes scanning the lines with a sick, hollow dread. Her words are neat and careful, smudged in places where the ink has bled. She apologizes at least a dozen times, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. She says she never wanted to hurt me, that she hates herself for what she did, that she's staying at her sister's for now. That she's been seeing a therapist, trying to figure out how she let everything fall apart. She doesn't mention Ethan's name once. She asks if we can meet. Just to talk. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to explain, to say the things she couldn't say that night. I know I don't deserve it, she writes, the letters slanting with a shaky hesitation. But please, just one chance. I read the letter twice, then a third time, the words blurring and blending until they don't make sense anymore. My hands tremble, paper crumpling between them, breaths coming shallow and tight. I shouldn't go. I know that. I know I should burn the letter, delete her number, file for divorce, and pretend that the last 7 years were a fever dream. But my hands are already moving, pulling out my phone, thumbs hovering over her name, heart pounding in my ears. It rings twice before she picks up, her breath hitching on the other end. Hello? I close my eyes, throat tight, words splintering in my chest. It's me, I rasp. A sharp inhale, then silence long and heavy and deafening. You, her voice cracks, barely a whisper. You called. I got your letter. She breathes out, a soft, shuddering sound. I didn't think you would. I swallow hard, the edges of the paper biting into my palm. You said you wanted to talk, I mutter, the words clipped and stiff. So talk. She hesitates, a muffled sniffle. I can't do this over the phone, she stammers. Please, can we meet somewhere? Just for a few minutes? I almost hang up. I almost tell her to go to hell, that I don't want to hear a single word she has to say. But the silence stretches, thick and suffocating, and my voice betrays me. Fine, I mutter, the word clipped and flat. Tomorrow. That coffee shop on 9th, noon. I'll be there, she breathes, relief flooding her voice. Thank you, I'll be there. I hang up without another word, the silence rushing back in, heavy and suffocating. My hands are still shaking, fingertips numb, breaths coming fast and shallow. I sink onto the couch, head in my hands, eyes squeezed shut. I shouldn't go. I know that. But I can't seem to stop myself. She's already there when I walk in the next day, fingers twisting in the hem of her sweater, eyes rimmed red and hair pulled back in a messy knot. Her coffee sits untouched in front of her, steam curling faintly, the air thick with cinnamon and espresso. She looks up at the sound of the door, eyes wide and glassy, breath-catching. I almost turn around, almost bolt for the door, but my feet move forward on autopilot, pulling out the chair across from her, hands clenching tight in my lap. For a moment, neither of us speaks. Her eyes dart to the window, to the table, to her lap, lashes fluttering, teeth sinking into her bottom lip. The silence stretches, taut and brittle. "Thank you for coming," she says finally, voice soft and unsteady. I stare at the table, jaw tight, heart pounding slow and heavy. "Just say what you need to say," I mutter, the words rough and flat. She flinches, fingers twisting in her sleeves. Her eyes are red-rimmed, lashes clumped together, lips trembling. For a second, she doesn't speak, just swallows hard, throat bobbing. "I'm so sorry," she whispers, voice cracking. I never wanted this to happen." The anger flares, hot and sudden, wiping out the numbness. "But it did," I snap, voice low and shaking. "So tell me why, Emily. Why him?" Her face crumples, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't know," she sobs, voice breaking. I felt so alone. Like we were drifting, and I didn't know how to fix it." Her words wash over me, muffled and distant, each one dulling the ache until all that's left is a hollow, empty silence. I watch her cry, the woman I've loved for 7 years, and feel nothing at all.